Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Please sit down. I don't deserve a standing O, so thank you. I appreciate it. It's an honor and privilege to be before you this afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm extremely grateful to be in a position to be impactful. As you saw in the video, I've had a couple tough days in my life, 2 bad events, as Coach Beilein said. But I think those 2 days, those 2 events, tragically, have given me an amazing opportunity to add value to, an amazing opportunity to help other people. I feel blessed to be in the position that I'm in, and obviously I would trade anything to have my family back, but what I've learned from the events, the journey that I've been forced to go on over the past 8 years, I wouldn't trade it for the world. So that said, I think the way that we live our lives every day, the way that we face the smaller forms of adversity, the way that we overcome any challenge, the way that we handle ourselves in any situation, I think we got to build our lives for the big one. Whatever the big one is, whether it's a big one like what happened to me, or maybe it's something, hopefully not quite as tragic, but I think we got to live our lives in a way that's going to help us build it for the big one. Matthew 7, verses 24 to 27 reads, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who's built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who's built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash." So this verse is right at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, arguably one of the most important messages of Christ's ministry, right? And essentially he says, hearing, reading, even saying the words of mine, preaching them, that's not enough. You got to live them. And I think that it's difficult. It's easy to say, oh yeah, I go to church on Sundays, or I consider myself a Christian. I'm sure we all do. But when we face those big ones, that's when it really shows how genuine our faith is, and that really shows how strong it is. Because I think if we have a strong faith, if we put our faith and our trust in Him, when those big ones come, we'll be able to withstand those. We'll be able to withstand those storms, the storms of life that will inevitably come. So I think that we got to live our lives every day, though, in a way that's preparing us for the big one. I'm not saying live our lives in fear. Oh man, maybe the big one's going to come tomorrow. I'm not saying that, of course, but I think that the way we conduct ourselves, the way we approach the smaller forms of adversity, need to be preparing us for the big ones. And it's better to have something and not need it than it is to need it and not have it. This is kind of my wife's motto when it comes to packing for trips. It's better to have something and not need it, right? It's better to pack every outfit and not need them all, than it is to, right? So my point is that I think that, but on a serious note, it's better to be prepared for that big one and have it not come than it is to have that big one come and have no idea what to do. So I think we got to live our lives in a way that's preparing us for the big one, the way we conduct ourselves, the way we handle ourselves in the midst of the smaller forms of adversity. I don't want to say smaller. Adversity is adversity, right? But I think that the minor inconveniences of life, I think we got to approach those in a way that'll prepare us to be able to handle the big one in a way that enables us to overcome it. So that's the first verse I'd like to talk about. And when we prepare ourselves for that big one, one of the ways to prepare ourselves for that big one is by living with grit. Grit's what it took for me and the team that helped me overcome the adversity that we faced. That's how we did it. We had to approach it with grit. A lot of people have talked about grit recently. A lot of people have said, grit's passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. This is actually Angela Duckworth's definition. She went to the University of Pennsylvania. Pretty smart lady, Ivy League. Not quite Michigan, but it's pretty good school. So yeah, she said that grit's passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. She said that grit is sticking with your future day in and day out, not for a week or a month, but that it's about sticking with your future for years. And that grit's about working really hard to make that future that you see. It's about working really hard to make that future a reality. It's true, I like that. I've also heard that grit's about consistent action, not so much about intensity in the short term, but about consistency over the long term. That's also true. Those are obviously both great definitions, but they might be a bit idealistic. Not idealistic, but I think there's more specific ways. There's a more specific way to define grit that we can use to approach every situation we face, every adversity that we face every single day. So grit's 4 letters using my great Michigan education. Again, there are 4 key components to it. But I think it's driven by knowing our purpose first and foremost. It's driven by working for something bigger than ourselves, because if we're working just for ourselves, I think it's pretty likely that life is going to present us with adversity, with opposition, with challenge, with tribulations that'll cause us to give up if we don't have a driving force for why we do what we do, right? But if we're working for something bigger than ourselves, if we're working for the we, the company, the team, the organization, your families, whatever your bigger purpose is, I think we'll always do what it takes to get the job done, no matter the task. In fact, in Romans 8:28, as I'm sure you all know, it says, and so we know that all things work together for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. It doesn't say called according to your purpose or our company's purpose. It says called according to his purpose. I think that, we obviously got to honor the purpose. We got to live for our own. We got to, live for our why. Whatever drives us. There's got to be that little bit of that. But I think first and foremost, you got to work for him, work to honor him, because I think if we have that mission, if we have that purpose, I don't think there's anything that life will throw at us that'll be too big to overcome. So, and when we thank you, and when we work for that bigger purpose, that'll drive the 4 key components of grit. So the 4 letters, the G in grit, to me, the G stands for the growth mindset. The growth mindset believes that every setback, every adversity, every failure is an opportunity. The growth mindset believes that, we're not a product of our circumstances, we're the product of how we choose to respond. For me, obviously I couldn't control what happened to me, right? I wish I could go back, and make sure those days never happened. But unfortunately, they happened, so they were in the past, and I couldn't control them. But I knew I could control how I respond. And we always have complete control over how we choose to respond. We very rarely have control over our circumstances. Most people don't wish adversity on themselves or on anyone for that matter. But I think that we always have complete control over how we choose to respond. James 1, 2 and 3 said, "Consider it pure joy whenever we face trials of many kinds, because we know the testing of our faith produces perseverance." I don't stand before you this afternoon and say, man, you know what, I'm really thankful. I was really joyful when I came out of that coma, when I learned all that had happened to me, when I learned that I was in a plane crash. I wasn't joyful when I was learning how to walk, right? But now that that we overcame it, and I look back on it, and I'm like, man, I wouldn't trade that for the world. I mean, obviously, I would do anything and everything in my power to bring my family back, but the journey that it forced us to go on, the lessons that we learned from it, I think we can overcome anything we put our minds to now. I don't think there's anything that we're going to face in life that's going to be too big, too tough for us to overcome. And it would make sense. So adversity is part of life, and it would make sense. The adversity we face today is probably not going to be the last form of adversity we ever face. So it would make sense to learn things from the adversity we face today that'll help us overcome the adversity that we'll undoubtedly face tomorrow. I mean, it just makes sense. If it's part of life, if it's undoubtedly a part of life, why wouldn't we learn from it? Why wouldn't we find a way to take something positive from it? And yeah, like I said, I'm not saying whenever you face something at work or with your family or whatever, your spouse or whatever it may be, like, for me, I'm married now, and when my wife and I have a discussion about something, it's not like whenever I think about something differently than she does, I'm not, man, honey, I really wanted to have this disagreement. But you know what? We do. It happened, and so we learn from it. And when I can see things from her perspective, that's very important. It's very important to be able to see things from a different perspective. I'll talk about that more in a few minutes as well. But the adversity that we face today, it's inevitable. The adversity that we'll face tomorrow is inevitable. So why wouldn't we find a way to learn things from the adversity we face today that'll help us overcome the adversity that we'll undoubtedly face tomorrow? So the first component of grit is having that greater purpose for why we do what we do. We got to be working for something bigger than ourselves. And when we work for something bigger than ourselves, that'll drive us to have the growth mindset, as I mentioned. Consider it pure joy whenever we face trials of many kinds, because the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Secondly, that same verse, a few verses later, James 1:12 reads, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having withstood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him." Again, I don't wake up every day and say, man, you know what, life, throw some more challenges at me. I need to learn some more lessons the hard way. No. But I know that when we overcome it, we shouldn't think if we're going to overcome it. We should think when. Life's going to throw things at us that we can't control. But as I said a few minutes ago, we can always control how we respond. 99.9% of the time, we can always control how we respond. I'm in a hospital bed. I'm in a coma. Coming out of a coma, I can't walk. I can't talk. I obviously can't control that. But if I have this goal of getting to Michigan, I'm in a tough situation right now. I'm going to have to make the decision to be resilient. I'm going to have to spend my time and energy focusing on my response to what happened to me rather than dwelling on the less than ideal circumstances or dwelling on the event that I couldn't control, right? Because, so I wasn't particularly strong in economics at Michigan. Michigan Econ's pretty tough, but my major required it for better or worse. And so one of the things I do remember, not that I remember a whole lot, opportunity cost, right? So the opportunity cost of spending our time and energy focusing on the things over which we have no control, that's time and energy that we could have spent focusing on the things over which we have control. So I think that we got to realize that spending time and energy dwelling on the negatives, feeling sorry for ourselves, that's not going to help us achieve our goal of overcoming it. So I think that we got to make the decision to spend our time and energy focusing on the response. There's three big questions I think we can ask ourselves when something bad happens, when adversity happens. First question is, what does this mean? What does this adversity mean? Is this the beginning of something new, or is it the end of life as I knew it? Or is this a roadblock, or is it just a speed bump? I think it's more effective to look at things as speed bumps, personally. Obviously, for me, it was a roadblock of sorts. I couldn't play at Michigan the way I hoped to, but I was just going to have to adapt a little bit and take on a new role. So what does this mean? The second question is, what are we going to focus on? Are we going to focus on the fact that the adversity happened? Are we going to focus on feeling sorry for ourselves? Are we going to focus on, man, I didn't deserve this? Or are we going to focus on, what are we going to do about it, our response? And that leads me to the third question, which is, what are we going to do about it, right? And we can't control what happens to us, but we can always control how we respond. And I think it honors God, to overcome things. It honors God to work hard, even in the midst of inconvenient circumstances, even in the midst of trials and tribulations. As it says in James 1:12, blessed, he says, blessed is the one who perseveres under trial. He doesn't say, if you persevere, I think that'd be a good thing. He says, blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, right? Because having withstood that test of that trial, whatever that trial is, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. And so I think that whenever we face something, we have a decision to make. We can focus on the event that happened to us. We can focus on the negatives, or we can look at it as, okay, I didn't wish this on myself, but when I overcome this, not if I overcome this, when I overcome this, I'm going to be better for it. I didn't wish the adversity on myself, but since it happened, I'm going to find a way to get better from it. At Michigan, Coach Beeline would always say, come in the locker room after a game. We would lose a game that we shouldn't have. And he would always come in. He'd be disappointed, but he'd always say, we're going to watch the film of the game, and we're going to find a way to get better from it. Always, right? Because, the past is the past. What happened, happened. And so I think we got to find ways to look at it with a positive frame of reference and find ways to use it as an opportunity to grow and get better. So the third component of grit is integrity to me. And of course, we all know that integrity is doing the right thing and no one is looking. Of course, we all know that that's true. And of course, we know it's being honest and things like that. But I think, especially in the context of overcoming any challenge, any form of adversity, I think integrity is about following through on our commitments. It's about doing what we said we would do, especially when our circumstances change. Coach Beeline offered me a scholarship when I was playing at a decent, relatively high level. I was slow. I wasn't very athletic, but I could shoot. Coach Beeline likes guys that can shoot. And I had pretty good size. I was 6'6". And so I think he saw upside in me. He saw potential in me that I could be good for his team and help his teams win. But the accident happened 9 days later after I committed. I obviously couldn't control that. But his commitment to me never wavered. He even said, when I make a commitment, when I offer someone a scholarship, I honor. I don't offer that scholarship and say, you know what, if you do what I expect of you, then I'll honor your scholarship. No, if I offer you, if you make a commitment, we make a commitment. We commit to each other. So I think that and that's obviously a pretty big example, but when we make commitments in any circumstance, I think we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to the person we made the commitment to, and collectively, I think we owe it to the team that we form with that person to follow through on that commitment, to do what we said we would do, especially when our circumstances change, especially when we don't feel like it. If my wife asked me a favor during the day, if she sent me a text and said, hey, can you run X, Y, or Z errand on the way home? Of course. And I said, of course, you got to do what the team needs, right? And then I have a tough meeting, tough afternoon of things, and I don't feel like it, but I told her I would. So I got to follow through on that commitment, right? And I think that if we follow through on those commitments, the smaller commitments, that'll prepare us to follow through on the big ones too. So whenever that big one comes, we got to have lived our lives in a way that prepares us to overcome it and prepares us to thrive in the midst of that big one. Not just survive. I think we got to live our lives in a way that'll prepare us to thrive. So the last component of grit, in my opinion, the last letter is T, and T to me is that team first mentality. It's going to take a team to overcome anything truly significant. It's going to take a team to achieve anything truly significant. We got to think we before me. At Michigan, I wish who knows how good I would have. Had the accident not happened, I have no idea what kind of a career I would have had. Maybe I would have torn both my ACLs my freshman year and never been able to really play anyways. I don't know. But since I couldn't have the role that I wanted to, that I hoped to have, I took pride in what I could do and rebounded for guys in practice, playing dummy defense. And stuff like that, stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet, but you know what, maybe if I could fill my role a little bit better, maybe that'll help my guys who are playing in the games fill their roles a little bit better too. I apologize for all the Michigan examples. I know we're a lot closer to Michigan State than we are to Michigan, but that's okay. But what I was saying, if I could fill my role a little bit better, maybe that would help them fill their roles better too. And one of the things that I could do, we would travel, and since I couldn't help the guys on the court, one of the things that I could do was unload the bags from the plane and load them from the bus to the plane and the plane to the hotel. I think I took pride in that role, and you know what? If I could unload those bags a little bit better, maybe that would help my guys play a little bit better too. I don't know if that actually happened, but my thought was, you know what? A rising tide can lift all boats, right? If we can fill our roles a little bit better, and if I can fill my role a little bit better, maybe it'll motivate them to give a little extra. If they see me in practice. Now, keep in mind, I was a lot slower than them after the accident. I couldn't run very fast, but I would run suicides. Coach would finish a drill, and coach wouldn't like the outcome. And he'd blow his whistle and say, "Give me a 30." Got to run a 30-second suicide. I would always finish last. I never finished first, but I would always finish last. But I ran as fast as I could, as hard as I could. And you know what? Maybe if they saw me giving everything I had, maybe that would help them want to give a little extra too. I have no idea, but my thing is that a rising tide can lift all boats.